learning the weekly portion, the Parshas HaShavua, the weekly Torah portion. And we are learning the commentary of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh, the holy Ohr Hachaim, who shares with us some deeper insights into the Parsha. The first one, he talks about the fact that the psukim, the verse, at least the first verse, it seems to switch between giving the more general location and then giving the specific location afterwards. So, for example, when it mentions about Hashem speaking to Moshe, it says, where were they? Or where was Moshe, I should say. It says, Moshe was in the desert, Bamidbar Sinai. Where in the desert? So then it gives a specific location, Oyel Moye, the tent of meeting, which basically means they were in the where the tabernacle, it was by the tabernacle. And that's where Hashem spoke to Moshe. So the general location was the Midbar, the desert of Sinai desert. And the specific location is the Oyel Moye, is this tent of meeting, which basically refers to the Mishkan. Now, what about when it talks about when this took place? When this took place, it says it took place on the first day of the second month, which means Rosh Chodesh Iyar, on the second year that they left Egypt. So here, when it talks about time, it speaks about specific time, the day, the month, the year, first the day, then the month, then the year. In the order of the specific, specifics is before the general. So when it talks about location, it speaks about the general and then the specifics. When it talks about time, it speaks about the specifics and then the general. So that is sort of like a passport to get deeper into the message over here. So again, we're talking about the first pasuk in this week's parsha, Parshas Bamidbar. And when it talks about location, it first mentions the desert of the Sinai desert, and then it talks about the specific location called the Oyel Moye, which is the Mishkan. And when it talks about time, it talks about the day, the month, and then the general year. So it seems to contradict itself. Are you supposed to first say the specifics and then the general? Or are you supposed to first say the general and then the specifics? So that's the question that the Ohr Hachaim is bothered with. And he says that the answer to this question has to do with the fact that the Mishkan is very unique and Hashem is very unique. What does this mean? So the Ohr Hachaim says that when we talk about Hashem speaking to Moshe, and he says that it took place in the wilderness or the desert, Sinai, and then it mentions the Oyel Moye, the tent of meeting. And the Ohr Hachaim says, you know what that really is? That's much bigger than the desert, the Sinai desert. The tent of meeting, you thought is this little structure? No. The wilderness of Sinai or the desert of Sinai is the small thing. And the tent of meeting, that is the big thing. And he says, when we talk about Hashem, you say not where Hashem is, because Hashem is everywhere, but you say that Hine makoim iti, behold, there is a place with me, with Hashem. Meaning Hashem is everywhere, and this place is with him. Not that Hashem is in a certain place, because the place, the location, is subordinate to Hashem. Hashem transcends space, and the universe is not where Hashem is. So therefore, it says all places are subordinate to a place where Hashem encamps. In other words, Hashem's Shekhinah is everywhere. And therefore, it mentions, similar to the way it talks about time, first mentions the day, then the month, then the year. So the same thing applies to the location. First, it mentions the Midbar Sinai, the desert of Sinai, and then it mentions that this is by the Ohel Moyed. What does that mean? What it means is that the Medrash says that the entire Jewish people stood in between the two poles of the ark where the Shekhinah was. In the time of Yehoshua, everyone, when the Jordan River split and the Jewish people crossed. So before that, Joshua gathered all of them, told them what's going to happen. And when he told them what's going to happen, he said, come and hear the words of Hashem. And what that meant was come in between the two poles. The ark had two poles that they would carry the ark, and every Jew was able to stand there. That means it was much bigger than anything that we can imagine. So what the Ohr Hachaim is basically saying is that the Ohel Moyed, the tent of meeting, which refers to the Mishkan, this was actually more encompassing because it was really the whole world, because this is where the Shekhinah is. That is a much greater location than the actual Midbar. Now, physically, it looked smaller, but in it was unlimitedness that made it that it was much bigger. So that's a little insight that you get when you see the wording of the pasuk. You start understanding a little more about the vastness of Hashem and his unlimitedness. And again, this is one of the deeper ideas of that we find about the Beis Hamikdash, that the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan, there was an element of space to it. Everything had a measurement, but there was also an element that was unlimited. That, in other words, even in the space, there really was beyond space. It was beyond any limitation. And that's the first insight of the Ohr Hachaim. And now comes the second one. And the second one has to do with the counting of the Jewish people. And this is something that's really interesting. Of course, Hashem knows the number of the Jewish people, but yet Hashem wants them counted. He wants Moshe to count them. And the Medrash says, Rashi brings down a Medrash about the counting of the Jewish people. In the first pasuk, Rashi says that because Hashem cherishes them, he counts them often, all the time. When they left Egypt, he counted them. When they fell in the Egel, he wanted to know how many were left, so he counted them. And when he wanted to rest his Shekhinah amongst them, he counted them. And Rashi spells out the third counting. So there's basically three countings that we're dealing with. The number one is they left Egypt. Number two, the Egel, after the Egel. And number three is the Parsha that we're reading now. What's the difference in time? Well, when they left Egypt, Pesach time. Then the next counting was when they sinned with the golden calf, was a few months later, because the breaking of the tablets and punishing of the, so they, in other words, Matan Torah was in Sivan, 40 days later was Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz. That was the breaking of the tablets. And then, of course, there was a series of uh, begging Hashem to forgive the Jewish people, and Yom Kippur was the final atonement for the sin of the golden calf. Now, let me tell you where it is. In Exodus 32, Exodus 32. So it talks about the punishment for all those that sinned with the golden calf. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you don't forgive them, erase my name from your book. That's where it is in Parshas Kisisa. And Hashem sent the plague and so on. And that's basically the punishment of the golden calf. Now, in chapter 38, so it talks about the donations for the Mishkan, and that involved people giving the half shekel, and they counted the entire Jewish people over there. And that counting, the Jewish people came to 603,550. Now, the first counting, which is interesting because it doesn't really say it so clearly, but it's really in Parshas Boy, where the Jewish people are leaving Egypt. So it says the end of 430 years, in the midst of the day, they went out, and this was a day of shimurim, protection, of watching. And it says about the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. Anyway, it says that they left Ramses to Sukkos like 600,000 Keshesh Meyos Elef Ragli, 600,000 people besides for children. And what that means is that Hashem counted the Jewish people there. It doesn't say it so clearly, but that's the meaning, that Hashem counted them, and they were 600,000 besides the children. So that's the first count. And the second counting was in Parshas Pekudei, where they're donating, and they're basically getting counted by the half shekel, giving the half shekel, and they're going to get counted. Now, it's also in Parshas Kisisa, that same counting, because it talks about donating towards the Mishkan and counting the Jewish people. So it's basically referring to that counting. Now, the Ohr Hachaim now talks about, and he says that the pasuk Beis, the second verse in our parsha, it talks about counting the Jewish people, and this is the third counting again. And he brings down Rashi about Hashem loves us so much, and he counts us all the time. But he says there's a little problem. He says, because when did the Jewish people get the Shekhinah? When did the Shekhinah rest amongst the Jewish people? It rested the beginning of the first month, Nisan, of the second year, right? The first month, Nisan, is when they inaugurated. You had the Shiva Simei Hameluim in the end of Adar, and then Shmini, Yom HaShmini was the first day of Nisan. So they inaugurated the tabernacle. Now, Rashi brings the Medrash that says that when Hashem came to bring his Shekhinah, his divine presence, he counts them. And when is that? A month later. Iyar. a month after the inauguration. Ohr Hachaim says, what are you talking about? If it's all about Hashem bringing his Shechina and you want to count them because Hashem is going to bring the Shechina, count them then, not a month later. So it doesn't seem to flow. If it's all about counting the Jewish people when you're going to do your Shechina, when you're going to bring the divine presence there, count them right away. So again, let's just summarize what we've said. I know it's a little confusing about the countings, but basically, there were three countings that the Jewish people that we're talking about here. First one was when they left Egypt, and it says that there were 600,000. Then it talks about the counting after the counting after they sinned with the golden calf, and now when they're actually inaugurating the tabernacle and the Shechina, the divine presence, going to rest there. So Hashem counted the Jewish people a month later. And as it was inaugurated in the month of Nisan, Pesach, and a month later, it was Iyar, and that's when this counting took place. And it's right there written in the first verse that it's exactly what day it is. It's the first day of Iyar. Fine, but the Ohr Hachaim says, well, if it's all about Hashem's Shechina resting there, then why did we wait a month? So the Ohr Hachaim says that the counting, he goes through the different countings, and he says like this: the counting after the ego after the sin of the golden calf, how much were they? 600,000 and 603,550. How much were they when they left Egypt? 600,000. Again, the counting when they left Egypt, it's a little vague. It doesn't really say. It's really Hashem counted them. But the number is Keshesh Meyos Elef Ragli Ha'am, that they were 600,000 besides for the children. So it means that they were 600,000. And here they're 603,550. Not here in Bamidbar. I mean, in this counting that was after they sinned with the golden calf. They're now, so how much did they change in number? After they left Egypt, they added in number. People turned 20. The counting is from the age of 20 to 60. So how many new people came to this stage of being counted, this age limit of being counted? 3,550. That's what he says. And that was in approximately 6 months. Because this was like right after they were forgiven for the golden calf, and they got the second set of tablets, and that was Yom Kippur. So basically 6 months. Yom Kippur is approximately 6 months after Pesach. So it's in 6 months they got 3,550 more Jews, more 20-year-olds. And keep in mind that many people died because if they sinned with the golden calf, and there were 3 types of punishments that were given for the people who sinned, right? We had the people who had sinned after being warned, and they had witnesses. We had people who there were no witnesses, and then there were people who had witnesses but they weren't warned. So ultimately, these 3 different forms of punishment affected the Jewish people. So there definitely were numbers that died. The difference in their census obviously was there were many more people that were born or that reached the age of 20 than the people that died. So so that would be the difference in number. He says, but think about our calculation. When is our calculation? It's not Yom Kippur. That was the second count. This is 6 months after Yom Kippur. Now we're at the second Pesach. where the inauguration of the tabernacle. So now we're at the second year, and it's 6 months after that. What was the number? What's the number here in Parshas Bamidbar? The calculation here is 603,550, exactly the same. That sounds a little strange. They didn't get one more person. In all of this time, no new person became 20. In the previous counting, they actually lost a lot of people, and still they had a major amount of a decent amount of new people, 3,550. That's after with all the deaths and everything. In other words, you have to calculate all those deaths, and still with calculating all the deaths, they still had an extra 3,550. Who knows? It could have been, it could have been, let's say, 30,000 deaths. That means they had 33,000. And now another 6 months, and there's no extras. He says, not only that, they were involved in a major mitzvah now. They're building the tabernacle, which should be a source of blessing. So they should have for sure multiplied and thrived and flourished and proliferated. And how could it be that the numbers are the same? So he says, that he says, in addition to the fact that there is a medrash that says that no one died when when um, during the time that they were building the Mishkan. Now he says that, but it's very surprising. Why were there no new people? That's his problem. That's the problem. That's the real question. Why is the numbers? Why are the numbers not getting larger? So he says that if you look at it, there's a major difference. He says that the tribe of Levi needed to give shekels for the half shekels for the offerings. So they were included in that counting, which is in Parshas Pekudei, that they the calculation was 603,550. So the tribe of Levi is part of that count, and and he says our counting did not include the tribe of Levi. Now, if you think about it that way, that means that there's a major difference. The previous counting is counting Levi in it, and you get 603,550. This counting is without the tribe of Levi, and you have 603,550 even without them. So what comes out is it is a substantial difference in number. Now, the Ohr Hachaim then says that that's the reason why the pasuk emphasizes that the Levium are not being counted, because you're going to ask, why is the number so similar? So it keeps on emphasizing this idea that the Levium, it emphasizes it an extra time, like the Levium are not meant to be counted, and it's explaining not to be so surprised that the number is the same, because it's not really the same. The previous number included the Levites, and this number is excluding the Levites. And he says, as we mentioned earlier, that no one died, and it was because they were involved in doing the Mishkan, and the Jewish people did flourish. They did get more, and ultimately, um, they and the counting reached the same number, even though they're not counting with them the Levites. He says, and that's why it says that when Moshe counted the Jewish people, when Hashem told Moshe to count the Jewish people, it says that um, he wants them counted when he's going to bring the Shekhinah, when he's coming to rest the Shekhinah amongst them. So he's counting them. So we asked, it's a month off. So the answer is that Hashem wanted to wait till the people will reach the same number, an identical number to the previous counting, so you'll be able to say, oh, they obviously are growing in numbers, and it'll show that no one died during those 6 months, and that instead they were flourishing because they were building in the Mishkan, and therefore no one died. So in other words, it wanted specifically awaited that extra month, even though the Shekhinah was already there for a month before they built the Mishkan, and it was in the beginning of Nisan, when the 8th day was the first day of Nisan. Nevertheless, the counting wasn't done until the Jewish people reached the same number, to show this uniqueness that they reached, that this same number they reached even without the Levites. So in other words, he wants to have them counted when he's resting the Shekhinah, but he waited specifically for this time when they're going to have that ability to be able to compare the numbers and contrast the numbers, that they're actually the same number, but they're without the Levium. Okay. So that's the number. That's the number. Okay. Now comes the next Ohr Hachaim. So again, we've got the first Ohr Hachaim was emphasizing the fact that Hashem is everywhere, and the Shekhinah rests in the Oyel Moed, and it's sort of an unlimited place. It's huge. This Ohr Hachaim emphasized the calculations of the Jewish people, that one was counting was with the Levium, and the other one is without the Levium. And this is the counting that we have here. And even though it's the same number, but it's really means that the Jewish people did grow, because it's not counting the Levium within this counting. And as you can see in the Psukim, that it's not counting the Levium. It counts each tribe, and it leaves out the Levites, and it has to do with the fact that each of the tribes were positioned in a certain place around the ark, and it's explaining each of these groups of the tribes, and it's excluding the Levium. Okay, now comes the next Ohr Hachaim. The next Ohr Hachaim talks about the fact that the pasuk seems to repeat itself. It says Su'u and Tifkadu. Su'u literally means lift the heads of the Jewish people. Generally refers to counting them. Su'u es roish kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Take a census, and then it mentions Tifkadu in the next pasuk. In the next verse, it says from 20 and above you should count them. So it seems like it's mentioning it twice. And the Ohr Hachaim mentions a medrash. The medrash says that the nations of the world were jealous. Why are the Jews getting this special connection with Hashem? So Hashem told the nations of the world, why don't you bring me your books of census, your books of your birth, the vital statistics books, and show me all of your lineage. I want to see everyone. Bring me all the books. The Hebrew is called the Sefer Ikoinen. It's basically these. Bring me the books of your lineage and documents that attest to your ancestry. And it comes out, he says, that none of the Goyim knew their ancestry because there was so much immorality and inappropriate behavior amongst them that they didn't have these lineage books. In other words, basically the book would have to say who the mother is married to, at what time, and when this child was born. Was she married? Was she not married? What was this boy? Who's the father of this boy? Was it from an affair? Was it, what was she at that time? What was he? Where was he at the time? When was the father? Who was the father married to at the time? And so on and so forth. And that would be the source. So now the Yidden had all these books. They had all the ancestry because, of course, Jewish people are known for their proper families, but the Goyim didn't have this, and so that's the reason why it mentions Su'u, lift them up, show their yichus, their uniqueness, that the exaltedness of the Jewish people, of how careful they are not to sin in these ways of inappropriate of immorality. And that everyone knows who their father is, something unheard of among the Goyim, but among the Jewish people, we have our ancestry very clear, and then comes the so that's basically why it says Su'u, lift them up, meaning hinting to this medrash, hinting to the medrash of how the nations of the world were jealous of us. And then Hashem sort of calmed them down when he said, okay, no problem. You show me your books of ancestry, and I could be close to you. But they did not have it. They couldn't show it. And there was too much stuff that they wanted to hide. And so ultimately, that is our exaltedness. And this is something that we have to be proud of, and we should emphasize this to our children, how special, how the uniqueness of the Jewish people, and how the ancestry and lineage and family and proper families are appropriate marriages and so on, how important it is. And then comes the next Ohr Hachaim. And the next Ohr Hachaim is that it's in verse 18, where it says, the entire nation he gathered on the first day of the second month, and they showed their genealogy according to their families, and from the age of 20 and above. And the Ohr Hachaim says that the verse, what it's actually telling us is that they didn't have to go through a whole series of dealing with questions of lineage. They had it right there. There was no problems whatsoever. Everyone had it clear. You know how when you have your papers all in order, there's no questions at all. Here, oh, you want to prove this? Just show it right there. It's all set up. We have it all organized, very clear. Our books are in order. There's no questions about it. We're not trying to hide anything. So they had all their books in order of all of their lineage and ancestry. And he says that on that day they were able to show it. Boy bayoim, he says, that specific day they were able to show everyone's. The records were so clear and precise that they could all be processed in the same day. And that is continuation, really, of this idea of the su'u, of exaltedness of Jewish people. So that's what the verse is hinting to, and it's also hinting to the fact that the Goyim were jealous, and this was Hashem's answer to them. Now, the Ohr Hachaim then mentions that Rashi brings down that they even had witnesses proving their ancestry, and the Ramban argues on Rashi and says, "What would they need witnesses for? Trust them. You could just each person was believed who the father was and which tribe he belonged to, and that was good enough. Why did you need witnesses? Why does Rashi bring down a whole thing about they had witnesses of their tribes?" The Ohr Hachaim says, he sort of defends Rashi, and he says uh, they showed that there was no mamzerus, that there was no questions of illegitimate children, and they had witnesses to prove that. And the fact that someone knows what tribe they're from doesn't prove that there's no illegitimacy. So he says the witnesses were for to prove that there wasn't any mamzers, no illegitimate children, and the lineage had to do with what tribe they're from. But one is not connected to the other, meaning there's that both were necessary. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, doesn't it say that, like, when it lists, say, like, all of the families, and they start with a hey and then with a yud, it says that's like Hashem certifying
Testified.
them. Right.
Right. Right. So so it seems that uh, the fact that there were witnesses is correct. There were witnesses. In addition to that, Hashem testified that everything that was testified was correct. In other words, you could have false witnesses, but so Hashem also further testified about the legitimacy. In other words, you're asking a question. If they had witnesses, why did which one was it? Did Hashem have to testify, or did they have witnesses? But what it seems like, my understanding is that it was both. They had witnesses, but even witnesses are not always, it's not always 100%. So that they had Hashem on top of the witnesses testifying that everything was perfect, that there was no issue of any illegitimate children. And then comes the next Ohr Hachaim. The next Ohr Hachaim mentions that if you look in the verse, verse 20, so it says every male that was the age of 20 and above, and then it says everyone who was able to go to the army. And the Ohr Hachaim is bothered with the usage of that word koil twice. It says kol zachar, every male, and it also says everyone who was able to go to war. Everyone went out to war. It doesn't say who was able to, went out to war. Now, the simple way of reading it would be every male that was able to go to war was counted. That's the way you would probably read it without this Ohr Hachaim. All the males from 20 to 60, and anyone who was fit to go to war was part of the calculation, was part of the counting. And that's why they didn't count the ones below 20, and they didn't count the ones after 60. Anyway, so it's basically from 20, from all those that are capable of going to war, to be soldiers. The Ohr Hachaim says that that's not exactly the correct reading of it. And he says the fact that the pasuk says koil is really telling you that not that they only counted the ones that were capable, fit to be in the army, but rather that everyone was fit. And this was a great miracle that the Jewish people in the desert, they had great health. There was no one who was not strong and physically fit. Everyone was physically fit to be part of the army once they were 20, and that's why it uses the word koil, emphasizing this, that everyone was fit to go to the army. In other words, that's why it repeats itself. It uses that word a second time, sort of redundant. But the Ohr Hachaim says that's what it's telling you, that they were all fit. and it was basically a amazing miracle that Hashem showing His love for the Jewish people, that he that no one was like to krachin, and no one was. They were all strong and capable and healthy. So um, that's his insight over there with regard to the Yotzei Tzava. Then the Ohr Hachaim repeats his point about the Levites were not counted, emphasizing the idea that the number of the Jewish people was actually more than the previous one. And then he says that he has a few little insights here, but then he jumps to Moshe and Aaron, and that's the verse says that these are the children of Aaron and Moshe on the day that Hashem spoke to Moshe at Har Sinai. So Rashi on the pasuk over here mentions that it talks about Aaron's children, but it says these are the children of Aaron and Moshe, but it only talks about Aaron's children. And so Rashi says, because he taught them Torah, when you teach your friend's child Torah, it's as if you gave birth to him. It says the day that Hashem spoke to Moshe, these were considered his children because he taught them what he learned from Hashem. So that's Rashi on this pasuk. Now comes the Ohr Hachaim. And the Ohr Hachaim. Well, I'm sorry.
What pasuk?
This is pasuk Aleph and Beis. I just realized I skipped one Ohr Hachaim, but maybe we'll do it after. So we're on pasuk Perek Gimel pasuk Aleph and Beis. Perek Gimel pasuk Aleph and Beis. So he says that it only counts. So now the Ohr Hachaim mentions what Rashi mentioned, that it only counts Aaron's children. It doesn't go through Moshe's children. Moshe had two children, but doesn't mention them. It mentions Aaron's children, and it says not because Moshe taught them Torah. So this is an alternative insight, because he davened for them that they should live. Hashem was angry at Aaron for being involved in the creation of the golden calf, and Moshe davened for the Jewish people. In addition to davening for the Jewish people in general, he davened for Aaron. And Hashem was specifically angry at Aaron because of his involvement. And it says that Moshe davened, and it worked for partially. In other words, it saved Aaron's two kids. Two of Aaron's kids died, Nadav and Avihu, but Elazar and Isamar lived. And that's why it mentions that these are the children of Aaron and Moshe. It doesn't mention Moshe's children because it's really mentioning Aaron's children, whose Moshe was considered their father because he davened for them to live. And Rashi brings, I'm sorry, the Ohr Hachaim brings the verse where it says that Hashem was angry at Aaron, and Moshe davened for Aaron, and it worked, and at least in part, that saved Elazar and Isamar, and it's because of Moshe's prayer. And it says the day that Hashem spoke with Moshe at Har Sinai. So it's mentioning the time that they were saved. What does this mean? So after the sin of the golden calf, Moshe went up to Har Sinai to beg Hashem for mercy for the Jewish people in general and for Aaron specifically. And his prayer was accepted that because Hashem spoke with Moshe at Har Sinai, meaning Behar Sinai, because he was the faithful servant or the faithful shliach, emissary of Hashem to receive the Torah, this made the special relationship, making his prayers even more acceptable, and he was successful in davening for them. So in other words, the way he's translating the pasuk is that it mentions B'yoim Diber. Why did Hashem listen to his prayer? Because he accepted the Torah at Har Sinai, and he was the term he uses is a tzir neman to Hashem with Kabbalas HaTorah, receiving the Torah and transmitting it to the Jewish people. He was a faithful emissary, being that it was that he received the Torah, made his prayers much more acceptable. My understanding from this Ohr Hachaim is that it's giving us a little inspiration now before Shavuos. That what made Moshe's prayer so acceptable? Of course, Moshe had a special relationship with Hashem always, but what it's emphasizing is that there's a special relationship that you have when you accept the Torah. That you accept not only to learn the Torah, but to teach it and share it. That special power that Moshe had made his prayers acceptable. Again, that doesn't say it clearly here in the Ohr Hachaim. I'm sort of expounding on the Ohr Hachaim, that's what it seems like he's emphasizing, meaning the Ohr Hachaim is bothered with a question. The question that's bothering him seems to be that it says, these are the children of Aaron and Moshe on the day that Hashem spoke to Moshe at Har Sinai. What exactly does that mean? These are the children of Aaron and Moshe. Fine, these are the children. Go through the names. The day that Hashem spoke to Moshe at Har Sinai. But what it's saying is, you know why this is the children of Aaron and Moshe? It's because of the day. B'yoim means because of the day that Hashem spoke to Moshe, or because of Har Sinai, Bahar Sinai. That these are the children of Aaron and Moshe, the day that Hashem spoke to Moshe because of Har Sinai. Why are these the children of Aaron and Moshe? Why did they live? Because of Har Sinai, because of receiving the Torah at Har Sinai. That's the reason why Hashem accepted the prayer. That of course, Moshe, you would think he already had brownie points with Hashem, but the pasuk tells us, you know why it was really accepted was really because of Har Sinai, because Moshe was this faithful emissary of Hashem, receiving the Kabbalas HaTorah, receiving the Torah. And that's why his prayer was accepted to save the life of two of Aaron's children, even after such a terrible sin, and so on. So it's emphasizing the reason why his prayer was accepted, and so that's why it says Bahar Sinai because not on Har Sinai, but because of Har Sinai, because Moshe did his job over there at Har Sinai, receiving the Torah, being the recipient of the Torah. That is the reason why his prayer was accepted. So he says really two things. He says that when did he daven for them? That was B'yoim Diber Hashem es Moshe, when Hashem spoke with Moshe, which basically means after the sin of the golden calf, when Moshe went to daven. When Moshe went, that was when his prayer. But it's because of Har Sinai. The day that it was is B'yoim Diber Hashem es Moshe. When Hashem spoke with Moshe, when he went back up to Har Sinai to ask Hashem for forgiveness. And why? Because of Har Sinai. So in other words, that's the pasuk says two dates, basically. It says two things. It says B'yoim on the day, in the place, Bahar Sinai. Now, everyone knows it's Har Sinai. So that's what's bothering the Ohr Hachaim. Why does it have to say Har Sinai? The answer is because it's telling you that it's because of Har Sinai, because of Mount Sinai, because you received it. Now, there was a Ohr Hachaim that I skipped by mistake on verse 33 on the previous chapter. I just realized. So the Ohr Hachaim over there says that the Levites, again, it repeats this a few times, that the Levites were not counted in the regular counting of the Jewish people. So on this Ohr Hachaim, the Ohr Hachaim says that the reason why it's emphasizing this is we know they're not counted. You could see it. If you look at the calculations, there's no calculation for Levi. And the Torah specifically excluded Levi from the counting earlier as well. So why is it in chapter 1? This is in chapter, we're now in chapter 2, verse 33. In chapter 1, it said that not only do you not see their counting, you see that there was a prohibition for them to be counted, right? They're excluded. So what is the pasuk again repeating it for in verse 33 of chapter 2? So he says that what's saying here is that even though this was very significant, it was a great honor that the Jewish tribes were positioned similar to the formation of the angels that descended with the Shekhinah on Har Sinai on Mount Sinai. Like the Medrash says that when the Shekhinah came down to Mount Sinai, many thousands of angels also descended, and they were arranged in certain division, which caused the Jewish people saw that they were awed by it, and they wanted to emulate the angels, which is actually why we talk about the angels in our davening every day. We mention the angels and their awe before Hashem because it's supposed to give us a certain feeling of awe when we think about how they are awed, and that's why we say in the morning davening about the Oifanim, V'chayis HaKodesh, Parash Gadol, that they're awed before Hashem. The Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. They talk about some of the angels say Hashem is holy, and 3 times they mention Hashem's holy, holy, holy. And Baruch, blessed is Hashem from His place. That they're not even able to. They're awed by Hashem, and so on. So the same thing happened when the Shekhinah descended on Har Sinai, and we saw those angels. We were awed by the angels because we saw how the angels, how much honor they gave Hashem, and they were positioned all around the so to speak, the Shekhinah, and people were awed by it. So it says that Hashem saw that they wanted to emulate the angels. Hashem said, "You know what? I'm gonna let you," and that's where the origin of this counting of where the Jewish tribes are going to be positioned around the tabernacle while they're traveling. This whole positioning is based on the fact that the Jewish people really wanted to be positioned around the Shekhinah, around the divine presence. And Hashem listened to their request, and He did it, and He put them in a similar manner. So it says that although this was a great honor for the Jewish people, and it was based on the angels surrounding the Shekhinah, nevertheless, the Levites should not be counted amongst the Jewish people. So in other words, it's emphasizing here that this was a great honor for the Jewish people. And yet, and even so, the tribe of Levi, it should not be, don't mistakenly want to include the Levites in this counting, because even though it's a distinction of sign of honor, nevertheless, don't count the Levites amongst this counting. So it's bringing out of how honorable this counting was, and based on that medrash. So that's this is a little inspirational for us, also for our davening. learning from the angels, realizing how many angels are, how the angels are awed by Hashem and they're honoring Hashem and so on, the fear they have for Hashem, and how the Jewish people saw that by the revelation at Sinai, and our whole camping around the Shekhinah is based on that request that we wanted to be similar to the angels. Okay, so that's that basically covers the counting and the traveling and the children of Moshe, children of Aaron, which were called Moshe's children, and the fact that the fact that Moshe had this great merit because of the Kabbalah HaTorah, receiving the Torah at Har Sinai. Okay, any thoughts? Anyone want to say anything? We've got 1 minute left. Okay.
Want to give us a wrap up?
Well, okay. So basically, we've got the first Ohr Hachaim had to do with the fact that the different countings came out with really different numbers. It looks like it's the same number, but it's really not. First counting 600,000, second counting 603,550, and that included the Levites, and the third counting 603,550 without the counting the Levites. So it's basically different numbers, even though it didn't necessarily look that way. But that's the way the Ohr Hachaim understands it, and then the Ohr Hachaim spoke about the fact that it's counted that all the Jewish people were healthy and so on when they were counted from the age of 20. It uses an extra word in the Torah to show that they really that Hashem made a great miracle, that everyone was healthy and strong and capable of going to the being part of the army, and another Ohr Hachaim mentioned about how they were jealous of the Jewish people, and the nations of the world were jealous of the Jewish people because they also wanted to have a special relationship with Hashem. And Hashem said, well, it all boils down to your holiness and purity, and your lineage. Do you have pure and holy lineage? And only the Jewish people had that, and they could prove it. They even had witnesses, to the extent that the Ohr Hachaim takes it in a different Ohr Hachaim. He emphasizes how they had all the documents in front of them. It was all organized, like everything was clear on paper. There was no questions or nothing vague. It was all very clear that everyone was acting in a righteous, certainly proper way, and no immorality. And that's also a great tradition that we have. It's part of our history, heritage, that the Jewish people are known to have that family is a great, very important thing. All right, we're going to stop here. I know I'm over time already. Sei gesund. Have a wonderful Shabbos. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.